Um, Hello everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bulbacast. I'm your host, the Caps fan. Today I have a couple of Bulba staffers with me. If you'd like to introduce yourself, we'll start with Fitzy.
Hey, I'm Fitzy. Uh, Becoming a regular member of the Bulbacast, but my main job with Bulba Garden is as one of the mods on our Discord server.
Awesome. Glad to have you with us, Fitzy. And last but not least, small crew today, we have Evcol.
Yeah, hey there, it's Evkel. Excited to be here. First time, long time. Have listened to a number of these, but first time joining. So excited to be here. I'm sort of a man about Bulba Garden, doing a lot of different things. Formerly involved in the forums, formerly involved as an editor in chief of Bulbapedia, and now I help out on all sorts of projects, including this one from time to time.
Yeah, great to have you on the cast once again. It's been a while. It's been a while. Have you been on any previous Bulbacasts? I know probably a few years ago, right? Many years ago.
I don't think so. I might have done one like literally 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something, but not since then, no.
Huh. Well, I mean, if it's your first time, glad to have you here, and if not, welcome
Glad to
back.
be here.
So today we're gonna do a cast that is the first of a two-part series on Pokemon Legends Arceus, the new game that just came out on January 28th. Um, Today's cast we wanted to split it up between some of the spoiler stuff to be in one cast and some of the non-spoiler related stuff to be in this cast. So what do I mean by spoiler free? Well, I'm going to consider anything that's spoiler free to be anything that has been announced by Nintendo, released in any trailers, gameplay trailers for the game. So everything from and we'll mostly be sticking to the first area, the Obsidian Fieldlands, with talking about the world, but everything from the newly released Pokemon that were announced, like Wordier and Basque Legion. Um, that's considered game here, fair game. But we're going to keep most of the story discussion to a minimum and talk mostly about the gameplay loop and mechanics. Um, but first, I kind of want to get started a little bit by just doing some general thoughts. I want to ask the two of you, how far are you into the game?
I'll go first. I am, without giving away too much, I am approaching the end game of what everyone seems to be considering the main story. I have, if this was a standard Pokemon game, I would have just finished the 8th gym and I'm on my way up Victory Road.
Well put. Evcol, you're finished with the main game, correct?
Yep, I am in the post game at this point. So, certainly not 100% or anything like that of the way through the game, but definitely through the main game, well into the post game.
Right. Okay. So all three of us are kind of near close to the end of the main game. So we'll try not to make any slip ups. But I also want to ask just general overall thoughts about your experience with the game so far. And again, just try and keep it a little like keep it spoiler free. But yeah, just general overall thoughts about the game, how you're enjoying it, if you're enjoying it, if you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I can go first, I guess. I think one of the things from staying fairly spoiler free before the release and then coming into the game is I was very nervous that they would not stick the landing on this. I thought that it was going to be a game where it wasn't super well put together, it was going to feel very redundant, and it was not going to be super compelling. And that has not been my experience. It is extremely immersive all the way through the core story. I think they do a really good job of sort of fleshing out the geography of the world in a way that's really gratifying and nice. It gives you that sort of desire to explore from the first time you step onto the Obsidian Fieldlands and sort of look around from left to right and see, mountains and water and other things in the distance. And you're like, wow, I want to get out there and do that. And so I think in that regard, they've really nailed it. Um, going in deeper into the game, a couple of gripes here and there about some of the specific execution and choices they made, but I think overall for a first shot at this, um, and in a world where I think if they made one or two bad choices, the whole thing could have gone really really wrong. They've done a really good job.
Yeah, well put.
Yeah.
I would say I agree with most of what you said. This is their first time doing something this huge with this scope, and they really nailed it for a first attempt. The gameplay is immersive. Everything is enticing. You know, when you get into the open world, you just kind of want to run around and explore and just mess around for as long as you can before doing anything regarding the story. And I love those types of games. I mean, it's obvious that it takes a lot of inspiration from something like Breath of the Wild, but at the same time, the gameplay loop is unique from that game and could be akin to something more like Monster Hunter. Um, and the way that it fuses a lot of the styles and elements of those two games is really, really interesting, and I find it really compelling. Fitzy, what about you?
Well, obviously, given the nature of what we're doing here right now, I will go into more detail on this. But my overall impression of this game can be summed up in one sentence. And it's one I've said to every single person who's asked me what I think of the game. Is, I've been playing Pokemon since Red and Blue came out in the West. And this Pokemon game, it is the first Pokemon game I have ever played that made grinding fun. Um, I had the game, I got the game when it came out, Arceus, and after a week, I was still in the first zone because I was just running around exploring and fighting and catching Pokemon, and it was like I'll get lost for hours just doing the random stuff that we all try to avoid when we're playing like the older Pokemon games. Like, oh god, I do not want to walk through this cave. I'm going to have to fight 600 Zubats. Becomes, all right, I'm going to go catch 600 Zubats
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we do here.
Yeah,
And
that
it,
is so true.
like, there have been so few, look, there have been a couple, but there have been so few times where whatever I'm doing feels like a chore. And it has been a breath of fresh air just playing a grinding game and not even feeling like I'm grinding.
Yeah, that's very true. I think a lot of the different encounters that you have with different Pokemon really add to that as well. So, you know,
Yeah.
one and also the player's choice as to how they interact with those encounters, right? So, in one instance, you might just run in head first with your level 60 Bidoof and go wreck some Weasels, or you could like take it easy and hide in some tall grass, throw out some food, and wait for them to go eat it before you catch that weasel. It offers the player a lot of choice in what they can do and it makes grinding fun. It gives you a set. It gives you a set of tasks, and it tells you go as wild as you can. I know people who have done the bare minimum. I know people who have literally said that they were going to complete every single page in the dex in an area before they move on to the next area. And I think that the fact that this game can allow both players to do that and both have a good time doing it is really special. I really like that.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to move into the discussion by kind of starting at the beginning and kind of working our way through and getting more detailed on some more specific points as we kind of go through the beginning of the story and the beginning of the game. And I think it's pretty obvious right now, like how the game starts. You have to get introduced to the world somehow, and is that a spoiler? Maybe, but it's within the first 50 minutes of the game, so you're gonna open it up and see it anyway. So I'll give myself a bit of slack there. So we'll go ahead and get started. The game begins in a void, a spaceless, timeless void, where we meet Arceus, and Arceus introduces us ourselves to the world. We tell him our name, we give him an appearance, and boom, we're there. We wake up on a beach, and we are greeted by a professor named Laventon and three Pokemon: Rowlet, Cyndaquil, and Oshawott. And these, obviously, to any Pokemon fan, you will immediately understand are your starter Pokemon. So I wanted to ask you guys, which starter did you pick and why?
Well, I picked Cyndaquil because it's Cyndaquil. um, Cyndaquil was it has always been one of my favorite starters. It was the first starter I ever played Gold and Silver with when Gold and Silver came out. And it's always had a soft spot in my heart. And it came down for me. Any longtime member of the Bulbagarden Discord server knows that I'm not a huge fan of Generation 5 games. And I won't go into that now, but for that reason, Oshawott wasn't really an option for me. It came down to Rowlet, who is my favorite Alola starter, and Cyndaquil, who is my favorite Johto starter. And the deciding factor for me was that it has been longer since Cyndaquil has been featured in a game. And I have no regrets about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I also started with Cyndaquil. My reasoning is a little different. I picked Rowlet when I played through Gen 7. And for the first time, I picked Rowlet. And went recently, actually did a replay of Pokemon Black and White, in which I chose Oshawott. So I was like, I haven't chose Cyndaquil in a while through a Pokemon adventure, so I'll just go ahead and pick him. Evkul, what about you?
Well, I don't think this necessarily makes for the most compelling podcasting, but I also picked Cyndaquil. I would love to see statistics on this because I do feel like most people I know picked Cyndaquil. I was very drawn to the sort of direction they went with Typhlosion, which I thought was probably the coolest of the Gen 2 starters. And then here, I think they made it even cooler. Although I think all three of the designs are neat. I typically go with a water starter, but I don't know. I just something about sort of where Cyndaquil was going to take me was very appealing. And so decided to go with that.
Yeah, I also kind of wonder if, what we know about Sinnoh, and of course this is not Sinnoh, this is Hisui, but based on what we know about Sinnoh, there's not a lot of fire types. I wonder if maybe that had a little play into people's decisions.
It might have.
Yeah.
But
I will say that most of my friends offline outside of Bulbagarden actually went with Oshawott, because they thought that I've forgotten it. Samurot's new design was the coolest.
I do like Samurot's new design. I think it's pretty cool, but I do prefer Typhlosion. The purple flame is just so sick.
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
But one thing that's different about this set of starters is that they come from 3 different regions. And this is the first time in a while, I don't actually know if ever, maybe, where that's the case. And I was just wondering, did you guys have any thoughts on that? I just thought it was kind of cool.
One thing I did like about it, excuse me, was a common discussion that happens among Pokemon fans is, why aren't there more starters in the wild? Like, if these Pokemon are so docile and so easy for people to train, why can't we get more of them? Why is there only ever one? And I did like the fact that really for the first time, there is a story reason why, we all picked Cyndaquil. There's a story reason why it's going to be hard for us to get an Oshawott and a Rowlet. And it's because Oshawott and Rowlet aren't from Hisui.
Right.
So the nitpicky side of me that cares about story in a Pokemon game liked that. But it was a bit difficult when it came to the selection, because as I said, Rowlet and Cyndaquil are my favorite starters from their respective generations. So it took me like literally right up until the day before the game came out, I was still going back and forth. I was like, Cyndaquil, Rowlet, because I enjoy both of them so much. And that problem also comes from the fact that barring remakes, this is the first time where we're not really going into that selection blind. Like, when Sword and Shield came out, I picked Sobble because I thought Inteleon, its final evolution, looked the coolest, and that was literally all I went off of. But I have memories wrapped up in all three of these Pokemon that made the choice such a harder decision.
That's definitely true. I mean, yeah, Oshawott is probably one of my favorite starters ever, and it hurt my heart to not pick him. But I was like, I just used you, so I will use someone else. But I think that's definitely a good point about having the starters available to you, from the native Sinnoh starters available to you in the wild as well, is interesting as well. Is that a spoiler? Oops. But Evcol, did you have any
I
thoughts
don't
on
think
that?
it's a spoiler. Piplup was shown in the trailers, so
Well, there you go. Evcol, any
Yeah.
thoughts before we move on?
I mean, yeah, I think, one of the things I think that this game benefits from being released now versus, them trying this on the GameCube or something in 2003 or 4 or something,
Mm-hmm.
is that you have this huge range of Pokemon available to you. And so, going to the past generation starters, I think is a nice way to pull fans through. And so you don't have a situation where it's like, all right, well, right now we've got, 251 and we've got to jam all 251 in there or else fans aren't going to be satisfied and it's going to feel small. It's like, well, no, they can sort of pick and choose from all the generations and incorporate all that in ways that I think mostly they do well. I have a few gripes on that, but I'm not sure if that's we're at the right point for that. But yeah, so I think I appreciated that they went for some past starters. I almost wish there was more variety of the starters. Like it would have been cool if they went with 9 or something.
That's true.
Really stretched across generations and whatever.
need
But I
Charmander.
understand why they went for 3 and all that. They want that sort of continuity and tradition. So yeah, I think overall I'm good with the choice they made and the selections they made. I would have been happy, frankly, with any combination of grass, fire, water.
And I think it's also interesting that, a lot of the speculation up to this point, with the trailer information and whatnot, was like, oh, well, Professor Laventon talks in a way that makes it kind of seem like he's from Galar. And so it's like it kind of begs the question, well, these three starters are kind of just randomly grabbed from different generations and different regions. And it makes sense as to why he would have them. He's a Pokemon professor. But why doesn't he offer any Galar starters? I don't know. Just a weird thought. But, you know, um, I think it's probably best to move on from the starter discussion and we can move into discussion about the Jubilee Village. Um, Once we catch the three starters for Professor Laventon, the tutorial that teaches us how to catch Pokemon in this game, which I think is a pretty good tutorial actually. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and it gets expanded on a little bit more later. But
Yeah.
we end up in Jubilee Village, which is the main hub for this entire game, which is a first for Pokemon. We don't really have very many instances in which we have one big town. Oftentimes you'll be traversing the world going from town to town. So that's another difference between this game and some of the main games. Um, what do you guys think about the village? I think that it is a nice it's a nice atmosphere, but I kind of wish there was a little bit more to do. Um, I mean, there's quests and side quests, and we'll get into those later. But I kind of wish that it felt more alive, if that kind of makes sense. I think it's nice, it's open, it's big. There is already a lot to do, but I've seen like things like saying like oh well, this lady on the main street has been sweeping the same spot for the entirety of the game. And I mean, it kind of would have been nice to see people move around, interact with each other. Maybe see people sitting at the wallflower every once in a while or eating some mochi or whatever. Um, but overall, I think that they did a pretty good job with the village. It has all of your essentials. Um, and of course, it has the Galaxy Team building, which we will also get into later. So
Yeah.
thoughts on the village?
My one major gripe about the village. I like the village. I like the central hub that you come back to. If for no other reason than you don't need to find where all the facilities are in every new town, which is always a minor annoyance, but an annoyance all the same. Um, the the only real gripe I have with Jubilee City is that it is just large enough that it's a pain that you can't use your ride Pokemon.
That is very
Um,
true.
it is like go like one or two more quick travel points in the city would have made the city feel a lot less tedious to me. But as I said, that is really my only gripe. I like how all of the services and shops are in one location. So if you're not doing side quests, you're right there by the entrance to the town. Um, and I thought it felt, pretty alive. I have heard the gripes about people doing the same repetitive actions. But it's a Pokemon game, and we're talking about a game series where we've moved on. Like not too long ago, it was literally just sprites walking back and forth between 2 points. And even when it moved into more detailed models, they kind of just stood there. Um, the fact that the people are doing things at all is a step forward for the game, for the game series. Is it up to the standard of other games of this ilk? Probably not. Um, but and this is a thing that I have said a lot. Um, I try really hard not to compare Pokemon to other series. I try really hard when I'm judging one of these games to compare Pokemon to Pokemon. And I feel like a lot of what Jubilee City does has in it is a step forward for Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a good point that I hadn't considered. Only a short time ago. I mean, even still in Sword and Shield, you have just NPCs moving from point one to point two and back to point one. It's not very interesting at all, and it does feel more alive in certain ways. I mean, over the course of the game, you'll see new houses being built, new additions to the city. As you complete more side quests, you'll see more Pokemon in the city, which is super cool. So it does feel like it grows, but I don't know. I think it's a valid concern, but also a valid response.
Yeah, I mean, I think the it's a Pokemon game is like pretty much where I land.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, if this were a different franchise that had a different set of priorities, it would look different, and I think it would look maybe more modern. But I think they made the intentional choice to not go in that direction, um, which is mostly fine. I think I'm willing to. I don't want to belabor this point too much or sit on this too much, but I think it's fine. But I am excited to see how they iterate on this in the future.
Yeah, and
And
and to bring back your point, Fitzy, earlier about talking about like the fast travel and it's too big enough that you can't. It's kind of annoying you can't use the rides. When I first started playing the game and I opened up the map and saw all those like war points, I was like, this is kind of dumb. Why are there so many war points in this main hub? But the more and more I went through and constantly had to go from the like mastering moves part to the items to like or even just to like craft an item and then put it away in your item storage. It you got to walk there. And I mean,
yeah,
it sucks, but it is good that everything is in one place. It is a quality of life improvement, as opposed to searching out those things in other games. I do want to quickly move on because we spent a lot of time on the early parts of the game, and I kind of want to get into the main chunk of the game, which is exploring the the larger environments, open world areas. So once we pick our starter, we'll head out into the wild. And as soon as you walk in, you hear those same like piano notes from like that, similar to like Breath of the Wild, and boom, you step into the wild, and the world is your oyster, only to be stopped by
The world is
Akari
your cloister.
and the fact that you need to learn how different Pokemon work. um, but I would like to talk about the world for a bit. So one misconception that a lot of people had going into this game was that it would be a fully open world game where you could go anywhere in the world, a big open world, and it wasn't sectioned off. That's not the case here. We do have several open areas, but not one big open world. What do you guys think of that design choice? And would you have preferred a larger open world, or are you good with the like kind of sectioned off areas that we have?
I think the way in which they sectioned it off, it feels big enough, and I think that some of the mechanics choices they made to keep because certain encounters, like it's not like a Zelda game or something where you need a certain item to enter an area safely or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because you can sort of run by most encounters if you don't want to do them, um, I think it's probably a good choice to keep it separate. I think it would have been very hard to make it all one big world in a way that's like stable and immersive and not sort of. I feel like a lot of people would have sort of like if you've seen like Breath of the Wild speed runs where they just like do a couple hacks and like bang
Mm-hmm.
they're in the castle in like 3 minutes. I think you'd end up with situations like that, which um, are not, I don't think, the point of this game, and more so than in Breath of the Wild. And so I think doing it this way is a good choice. And so I like that it's sectioned off. I think it gives each area its own feel. Um, I think my one sort of, I don't think this is a spoiler to gripe about this. The fact that you have to travel through the village to get from area to area, I
Mm-hmm.
think is a big pain. Instead of being able to go just from one area to another without going through the village. I don't know why they made that choice. I don't understand a technical reason or a gameplay reason for it to exist. But yeah, it seems to be a choice that they made. So that's frustrating. But beyond that, I think it's the areas are big enough that you don't really feel constrained within any of them. At least I didn't.
Yeah. And I agree with pretty much everything he just said. um, and like the in theory, um, the idea of one giant open Pokemon world sounds like a lot of fun. Um, and if it came out, I'd play it because I enjoy Pokemon like that. But like just to take the first two zones, the Obsidian Fieldlands and the Crimson Mirelands. Um, if I'm in like if the game was fully open world and like even if it was let's say everything except for Jubilee was one giant area, if I'm going from the Fieldlands to the Mirelands, I'm gonna quick travel. I'm not running that whole way.
Mm-hmm.
Not if I have the option. Um, so I feel like the the way that they did it worked out the best. Because most people, because some people will, but most people are not going to run that far to get to the next area when quick travel is an option. They're just going to do the quick travel. Um, and with that in mind, the separation, the way they did it, allowed them to work with themes, and it allowed them to structure the story in a certain way. When you head out into Zone One's story, following the main missions, you know that the story's going to be in that zone.
Mm-hmm.
When you head to Zone 2, you know the story's all going to be there. And I think, and again, I don't have a fully open world Pokemon game to compare this with, but I feel that it made for a better flow of the game. It felt like it was divided into chapters almost.
Yeah,
And you can always go back and read a chapter you've read before, but you know where you're at in a certain point.
yeah, and we'll get more into this in the next Bulbacast with the story, but I definitely agree that each kind of section of the story fits really well with the world that they chose, the area that they chose to play it, you know. Um, on the topic of like a big open world Pokemon game in the traditional open world sense, I think if they were going to do that, Sinnoh would have been probably one of the best regions to do that because the world design actually makes sense, right? You've got your snowy parts to the north, you've got your sunny parts in the south, you've got your marshy terrain kind of also in the like the warm area. You've got general like kind of like colder feeling areas leading up to the big mountain in the middle. Um, and you've got your port out west, right? It feels like it is like a well designed world. And I feel like we can't really say that for a lot of other different regions. Like, I mean, Unova is just a big circle, right? But
Yeah.
um and it doesn't it kind of doesn't really make sense when you go from, you know, just like a desert in the middle of like a road, and then boom, a city is also like a major city is also like right there. So I mean, I don't think that they are going to make a big open world game anytime soon, because I think if they were going to, they would have probably did it in this game, and they also probably would have just had that going as like the main kind of world design going forward with a, you know, presumably series of Legends games. And you know, knowing that other Pokemon regions aren't structured as well as Sinnoh, I do like that they chose to not go with the large open world and instead chose individual areas and made sure to flesh all of those individual areas out to the best of their ability. And that's kind of where I want to go next. You know, open world games, one thing that they struggle with, and this is probably one of the biggest critiques of, like, for example, Breath of the Wild, is that it's an open world. It's a big open world. There's not a lot to do. And I feel like this is my personal opinion. You can agree or disagree with it, but I feel like because of the way they structured the game, the open world feel like the open areas feel very populated. There's a lot of things to do in every corner. There's all sorts of different Pokemon to encounter, all sorts of different items to find, you know, quests to do, um, kind of secret areas to find as well. So do you feel like the game encourages exploration and is well populated because of that?
So I think, does it encourage exploration? Yes. Is it well populated? That's where I have, I think, a little bit more of a challenge with some of the areas. I think, I don't know, Fitzy, what do you think? Do you think I'm like right on sort of the yes and no element of that, or not so much?
Pretty much. It's hard to say. Well populated is where I got kinda stuck. I absolutely believe that it encourages exploration. Within a zone, once you unlock a zone, the only thing really keeping you from exploring as far as you want uh, is uh, basically what would have been hidden moves in the past.
Mm-hmm. Like terrain.
Like yeah, like you can't cross water until you get the ability to cross water, but within that limitation in the first zone, you can go anywhere you want to go. And you're gonna find stuff, and you're gonna find Pokemon, and sometimes they seem to come out of nowhere. Like you're just earlier today, I was, riding across the zone, and all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh heck, there's one of the Pokemon that I don't have in my Pokedex yet." So I had to like stop and try to find it and catch it. Um, and then I had to mark it on my map so I could come back later because I failed to catch it and it ran away,
Mm-hmm.
and that made me angry. Um, but the trying to keep my answer just within the first zone to be as unspoilery as possible. There are, as with other Pokemon games, there are, the Pokemon that appear during the day and the Pokemon that appear at night. And the spread of what Pokemon show up is kind of weird. There are Pokemon that make appearances where I wouldn't expect them to be. There are Pokemon that are way more rare or way more common than I would expect them to be based on their history in the series. And maybe that was deliberate. Maybe they wanted a game where those Pokemon are easy to find or aren't as common because of the time period or the region or what have you. But there is. So, my answer to well populated is the Pokemon population is weird, but not entirely unsatisfying. The human population is very sparse.
I don't think
And
that's a drawback necessarily, though, because
it's not,
people
and
don't
it fits
venture
with
out of
the
the
setting.
town, right?
Yeah, but it can be a little, I don't know. It just strikes me as weird. Um, and again, it might bother me if I stop to think about it, but in the moment, I am so focused on the Pokemon that I don't care. But it is one of those things that when you ask me about how the game is populated, that I think about.
Yeah, I think most of the reason I answered that way was because, I like how, you can be doing one thing and then you can see something else out of the corner of your eye and simultaneously also go do that thing, right? You can see like a little boulder that you can smash with your Oshawott and then but also see a tree that you can knock down some berries with your Wurmple, like, and you can do both of those things simultaneously. And because there are so many of those options around you and also a lot of Pokemon around you, it feels kind of like you're always doing something when you're going through the world. And that's kind of what I meant by populated. Because, I
Yeah.
mean, if we look at the world just on its own, I mean, yes, there's a lot of Pokemon, but, there's a lot of really common Pokemon. There's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of trees, and we'll get to the graphics in the trees later. But yeah, that's kind of more what I meant by that. But I would say I overall agree with you in terms of that kind of viewpoint of what something like is if something is populated or not. Like I agree with you there. Um, I kind of want to move into the gameplay loop a little bit, and I think one of the biggest positives out of this game is how seamless the gameplay is with the exploration, right? You see a Pokemon, you stop, you are immediately thrown into the quote unquote gameplay loop, right? So let's see, you're just walking around the Obsidian Fieldlands, boom, you see a Ponyta and you really want that Ponyta, right? You can then you can immediately you crouch, right? Um, and you throw like a berry, and then you can catch that Pokemon, or you can run in headfirst and immediately throw one of your Pokemon at it, and boom, you're right into a battle, and it's all very very seamless. Um, so I kind of wanted to go into that and see how you guys felt about um, just the general gameplay loop of exploring, capturing Pokemon, battling Pokemon, rinse, repeat.
Well, since you brought it up, and you also kind of touched on it in the population conversation, one of the things that I find most cool while playing this game is the fact that you have your Pokemon and your items on hand at any given time, and they're right there. They're a button click away. Um, and there are times, as you said, there are times when you can, like, you're going off to do something and you can grab something else on your way there. And you collect items. I don't think this is a spoiler. It's given to you really quickly. You collect items by throwing a Pokemon at whatever provides the items. To get berries, you toss one of your Pokemon at a berry tree, and the Pokemon collects the berries. To collect rocks, you toss your Pokemon at the rocks. And then for wild Pokemon, you can either sneak up and catch them, or you can fight them. And because all of that is a button click away, and you can actually send out more than one Pokemon at a time, like each Pokemon can only do one task at a time, but you can send out multiple Pokemon at a time. So there can be a moment where where you see a Bidoof, and you start sneaking up on the Bidoof, and you realize as you're sneaking up on the Bidoof, there's a berry tree to your left, and there's, ore to your right. So you toss a Pokemon at the berry tree, and you toss a Pokemon at the ore, and while they're doing that, you throw a Pokeball at the Bidoof. And it all finishes at the same time, and you get all the happy musics because you caught things and gathered stuff. It's a lot of fun doing that. And it's um I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's
All good.
fun is my point.
2-word answer. It's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, you go and you have your Pokemon, and they can gather items for you. And what do you do with those items but craft? And, this is a big element of any open world game. And I kind of want to turn it over to Evkul on this one. How do you feel about the crafting mechanics in this game? And I know we're kind of doing a little bit of a 180, but it's still part of that gameplay loop, the crafting, gathering resources, whatnot. So how do you feel about crafting?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy the overall loop. I think crafting is the area that I wish this game had sort of more of. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that the crafting, I think, compared to where it could be, is pretty rudimentary. You can craft. It's again not a spoiler. This is all stuff that happens within the first 30 minutes of the game. You can craft your Pokeballs. You can craft potions. You can craft a lot of the other items that you're familiar with throughout the games, and you can craft more advanced things as you move through the game, and all of that is sort of preordained, and you work to it. But I really wish that there was some type of like class specialization in the game that it just isn't there. So if you're waiting for this, I guess maybe a spoiler to say it's not coming. But you can't specialize in crafting, or you can't specialize in catching or training or battling or something in a way that I think would really make this game much cooler and feel much deeper. If it's like, okay, you can choose to be a battling specialist and then you can get more critical hits or something, or you can choose to be a crafting specialist and craft master balls all the time, as many as you want, if you can get the right number of rare materials.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just missing. And so I feel like with all of these sort of open world choices they make, they're like halfway down the path. And then in a lot of cases, I think, in part because I suspect this is a much larger undertaking than I appreciate to create a game like this, they couldn't go as far as I would want them to. Um, with that said, I like the crafting mechanic, and I think there's points in the game where I felt squeezed for materials, and I had to do like grinding just for crafting materials, but that was pretty few and far between. There were like 2 points in the game where I think, again, because the urge is to go out and catch everything, that means you need a lot of Pokeballs, and if you need a lot of Pokeballs, you got to craft a lot of Pokeballs. But on the whole, I found the crafting mechanic satisfying. I will say that for me, I only find myself crafting like 5 things, and I think that's a little bit of a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
But that may be just how I play the game, right? Other people may craft a lot more or a wider variety of things. But for me, as you move into the end game, it's like, all right, I'm gonna have my great balls, my ultra balls, like that's what I need, and there's not as much of a need to craft the whole range of things.
I will say, I would start out in a very similar vein to you in terms of, what sort of items I needed and what sort of items I crafted. But as I went further and further into the game, and as the encounters did get harder, I found myself utilizing some of the other crafting options they give you. And I won't go into those, but I did like that touch. But I agree that some of them are just kind of useless. And I mean, you're always going to have those. You know, your clock in Minecraft is useless, right? I mean, so you're always going to have those in a game that utilizes crafting, but I think that overall it's pretty well done. I mean, it does what it needs to do. The fact you can craft multiple items at a time is really nice, considering that it seems to be the standard that given people's gripes about other Nintendo games and crafting in those games. I won't go into that, but I think that it does what it needs to do. It is a good incentive for you to continue exploring, collecting resources, because you will need to craft items to continue that loop. Um, and I think that's really enticing. So yeah, crafting. Let's move on from that, and let's talk a little bit about quests. So another element of many open world games is the side quests. And in many open world games, the side quests are sometimes more fun than the main quest. And you'll find yourself going and doing hundreds and hundreds of side quests before you even step foot through the main story quest, right? And a game like Skyrim comes to mind for that. But how do you feel like quests are implemented in this game? Do you feel like they are well implemented? Do you feel like they add to the experience? Do you feel like they incentivize exploration even further? How do you feel about the quests?
I think I'm of two minds about the quests. My first thought about the quests is that there's a lot of repetition to them. There's a lot of quests that are complete this Pokemon's Pokedex or catch this Pokemon. But as I said at the start, I have so much fun doing those that it doesn't bother me too much. I wish there was more variety, but the variety that they did give us is enjoyable. The I don't know if this is a spoiler or not, so I probably shouldn't say it. But I'll just say I feel like the side quests do a really good job of conveying a central theme of the game, which is people and Pokemon learning more about each other.
I would agree. I think that
Yeah.
they are very repetitive, but at the same time, I like how they make the in some ways that the design of the village lacks. I like how the quests help make the village feel more alive. And the more and more you interact with these people and do these quests for these people, the more and more they learn about Pokemon, and the more comfortable they feel around them, or uncomfortable they feel around them. And it's cool to see that. Efkel, go ahead. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no. I think I sort of agree that it is like it's redundant and it's fine. And I think I found that some of the I'll say like a quest that comes very early in the game, that if you aren't far in the game and may have seen about it, the bigger Buziel
Mm-hmm.
uh, quest, which just like you're looking for that 2'8" guy, and it is such a grind. Like
Oh yeah.
for me, as I said, I'm in the post game now. I have caught hundreds of Pokemon at this point in the game, like no exaggeration. And it probably took me 30 to get to that 2'8" guy.
Mm.
Uh, very very frustrating. Very, and it again, like there are much harder, like objectively from a gameplay standpoint, things. So it almost makes me wonder, right? If it's like, okay, well, here's your choices for quests. We can either give you these quests that basically rely on the RNG to go your way, um, or we can give you quests that are like complex from a collect a whole like a huge fetch quest type thing, um, or we can give you stuff that's easy to execute and you just run out into the field and do it and come back. Um, I think they probably strike the right balance, because if everything was the find a 5'5" this type quest, it would be a nightmare. It would be such a grind. It would be so boring. So I think the way that they balance it out on reflection feels good. Although I agree, sometimes it's just like, all right, going into the field, got a half. It's like a shopping list or something. Got a half page long list of things I got to catch and things I got to grab items wise, and I'm going to bring them all back and then knock off a bunch of quests. But given the game, I'm not sure what the alternative would be.
I do like
Yeah.
that the quests have varying kind of difficulty levels. What I wish is that it wasn't so sudden. I appreciate the fact that you are given harder quests right away. And I mean, I had a similar grind when I was trying to find that 2'8" Weasel. And a couple of other quests come to mind in the teens and the 20s of the quests that I'm still working on in the post game. Um, And I do appreciate those, but I think for newer players, especially for those who aren't necessarily as, you know, experienced with an open world game, open world genre, that I would argue that this game is trying to reach because, Pokemon wants to cater to its entire audience. Um, I think those quests can be really, really frustrating, and I wish they would have had more of a steady difficulty curve. Um, Rather than kind of a random difficulty curve, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, and I don't want to spoil too much again, but you know I think it's weird when I'm like close to the end game and I'm still doing quests that are like find this one item or catch this one Pokemon. I kind of wish then they would have had more, maybe like more like quests where it's like catch two different genders of Pokemon, or
There's
gather 20 items instead of one, right? And I think you guys will know, like, there are some quests that do similar things, but if you had more of a gradual difficulty curve, I think it would have the quest structure would have benefited from that.
one thing I do want to say, because I've decided it's not a spoiler, and if it is, it's a very minor one. Is one thing that I love about some of the quests, not all of them, but some of them, is the minor but noticeable lasting effects on the game after you complete them.
That is very true.
Um,
Yeah.
there's one side quest. I won't go into details on it, but someone asks you to show them a Pokemon because they want to learn about it. And when you bring them the Pokemon at the end of the quest, they're like, I'm gonna need more time to figure out what I need to know about this Pokemon. And you can say to them, why don't you just keep it as a partner?
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it goes into that theme of people and Pokemon learning about each other because this game is set when that wasn't a thing. And then for the rest of the game, every time you see that character in Jubilee Village, she has her new partner with her.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always walking around the village together. And it's the tiniest thing, but every time I see her and her new partner, it makes me smile. Um,
Yeah, I can think of a couple of quests in that similar style, and those again do I do think those quests do a good job of reinforcing the themes of the game, and kind of making the characters feel less like NPCs and more like more developed characters. Uh, um, okay, real quick, I want to touch on one more thing before we wrap up. And Evclaw, I know you need to go soon, so we'll start with you. Um, so jumping ahead a little bit, kind of in the beginning of the game, and again, is this a spoiler? Is it not? Who knows? I'm going to talk about it anyway. After some light plot, we are then asked to do a quest that requires us to quell Cleaver, one of the noble Pokemon that you'll find in the game that are new to Pokemon Legends Arceus. And this introduces somewhat of a boss mode kind of gameplay style, revolving around more of an action kind of style of play, where you participate in like both catching and battling this noble Pokemon. How do you feel about this new style, this kind of like boss mode gameplay? Do you think it works well?
Overall, yes. And I think, as I sort of griped in the Discord a little bit about this, um, which, by the way, if you're not a member, definitely come join our Discord. It's a great community. But yeah, I
yeah.
think, um, but I think given the nature of these encounters and the fact that they are fairly rare, they are fun and challenging and definitely different from anything else that you're going to see in any other kind of Pokemon game. So in that regard, I enjoyed them. I am glad that it's not the entire game. If the entire game was sort of, and again, I don't want to give away too much of the mechanics of it, but once you experience it, you'll know what I mean. If the entire game was very, very heavy on that gameplay, I don't think I would enjoy it as much. But I think they overall struck the right balance of how it plays and how it challenges you in a different way. But I don't think it's too difficult for somebody who's because Pokemon games are not games that really test your timing or reflexes in any meaningful way. Um, those encounters do, but with the nobles, but um, it's not unforgiving in a way that, right? It's not like
Right.
a game where your shooter, you've got to be precisely nailed in, right, so that you
Yeah.
can make a tough shot. It's like, yeah, no, you can do it. If you're somebody who's familiar with video games, you'll manage. You'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Or even if you understand the mechanics a little bit,
Yeah.
Fitzy, what are your thoughts on noble encounters?
They're awesome. I agree with Evcool in that I am glad that they are not the main focus of the gameplay. But I also wish there were more because I think they're a lot of fun. I think they are a departure from the classic Pokemon gameplay, which fans have clamored for with just as much intensity as they're clamoring for Pokemon never changing at all. Because this fandom cannot come to an agreement on anything. But I think that they provide a neat change to the gameplay that shakes things up, and they are legitimately a little scary.
Yeah.
Because um, for at least part of them, uh, it's you and a giant glowing angry ancient Pokemon. And they will wreck you if you are not ready for them. And they don't wreck your team; they wreck you.
Hmm.
And there's an adrenaline rush to that I don't think any Pokemon game has ever given me. The idea of fighting for your own survival was a lot of fun. So like Evcol said, I'm glad that's not what the whole game is, but what they gave us of it is probably the high point of the game for me. They are a lot of fun, and they're frustrating in a good way. They can be tricky to figure out, but once you figure them out, like you get a real sense of accomplishment, I thought.
Yeah, definitely agree. I really enjoyed the noble encounters. They were kind of a nice breath of fresh air from the normal gameplay loop. They tested your knowledge of the mechanics very well. They incorporated, they seamlessly integrated the battling into the boss fight. I think they're really well done. Um, Real quick, Evcol, I know you have to run, so I'll just quickly shout you out. Thank you for joining us today. Fitzy, I think we're probably going to stick around, do maybe one more topic, and then close this out. But Evcol, I know you need to go, so thank you once again for joining and talking with us. Really appreciate having you on the cast.
My pleasure. Thank you both. Good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for
Cheers.
coming, man.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, Fitzy, it's just us.
Mm.
Means we can talk trash about Evcol. Just kidding. Evcol, I'm sorry if you hear that on the recording.
Yeah, I'm sure he's not listening.
Probably not. So I kind of want to touch on one, maybe two more things that we didn't really get into too much. The first one being battling. This game introduces a new style of battling where you can choose between using your moves regularly, using your moves in strong style, which deals more damage but makes you have to wait longer to attack again, or agile style, which reduces damage but increases the chance you'll get to attack 2 times in a row. I found this mechanic to be incredibly thought provoking, especially after you get further into the game. In the beginning, I feel like it doesn't really matter too much unless you're fighting a nudge nudge stronger Pokemon. Um,
Hmm.
but you can mostly get away with just using like just regular old moves, especially if you know the type advantages, which I'm sure most Pokemon players do know. Um,
What's a type advantage?
I don't know, dude. Grass beats fire, I guess. But yeah,
Clearly,
what were your thoughts on this on this change up to the battling mechanics?
I lot of thoughts, most of them positive. I hope that this does not become the standard for Pokemon games. I do hope, because Pokemon does have a bit of a history of experimenting while staying true to their, core. Like when Sun and Moon came out, they changed up the gym mechanic. They did the island challenge, but they still went back to the gyms for Sword and Shield.
Right.
So I thought it was a lot of fun, but I kind of hope that it doesn't become the norm, because I do enjoy turn-based battling. It's fun for me. But that being said, just within the context of this game, I had a lot of fun with it.
Mhm.
And I have some friends who haven't really played with it. They just do regular moves all the time. And I'm like, you're missing out on so much. Because the two styles, you have the Agile Style, which means your next turn will probably come sooner.
Mhm.
Um, and the so for anyone who's listening who hasn't played yet, it is not like in the standard Pokemon games where it's you go, I go, you go, I go. There is a turn list,
Mhm.
and based on your speed and the speed of your moves, you know, the turns don't always go 1 and 1. For example, quick attack. It doesn't mean I go first this round because there are no rounds. It means I'm going to attack you, and then my next attack comes sooner.
Yep.
Um, so just to get that out there. Um, and it can really turn the tide of battle, taking advantage of the agile and strong attacks, because you can take an attack that normally is going to slow you down and make sure that it doesn't at the expense of a little bit of power with an agile move. You can also take an attack that would knock out a Pokemon that you want to catch
Mhm.
and hit it with a weaker agile move, which will give you a chance to catch it at a lower HP hopefully without knocking it out. Or you can overcome a bad type matchup with a strong move.
Right.
It provides a level of strategy on top of like. There's already so much strategy in Pokemon, having the right types, having the right moves, having coverage. Um, and then it adds one more layer of strategy, which gives you so many options in a Pokemon battle.
Yeah.
And it becomes crucial. Go ahead. Sorry,
I was
because
just gonna
I'll just
say,
keep talking.
I kind of want to touch on that for a second, because there is a lot of strategy in Pokemon, in typical Pokemon. I mean, you've got type matchups, different moves, status moves, condition moves, whatever, right? But a lot of the gameplay, a lot of the battling gameplay is really simplified in this version. You don't have abilities, so you can't rely on those to do an extra bit of lowering stats or even taking damage. The moves in general, there aren't a lot of them, so you kind of get really familiar with certain moves, and you kind of know really quickly whether it's going to be a good move or something to just leave aside. Um, so it does simplify the gameplay quite a bit, which kind of forces you to use those strong and agile style moves to actually succeed in encounters. I mean,
Yeah.
um, you can like I'm watching the video right now. Like you can go up
Well,
against this Geodude, right? And you can go in with a water type move, which most times, no matter if you're like at this stage in the game, in a traditional Pokemon game, no matter your level of your water type, it will probably one shot that Geodude because it's got 4 times weakness, right? But in these games, the power is dumbed down a little bit. The stats are also dumbed down a little bit. So you might not be guaranteed to one shot that. And I just like those little touches. Um, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. Sorry, I'm having mic issues. Ramble on for 1 minute and give me a sec.
Okay, I'll continue rambling on. I don't know. Something else that I liked about this battling mechanic is that moves kind of get stronger as you use them. You can't immediately use strong style or agile style. You have to actually like level up your Pokemon and make sure that they are growing before they master the moves themselves. I thought that was kind of a cool mechanic. You can buy moves, which is really cool. You can kind of change moves on the fly as well, which is a huge thing. Moves are not necessarily tied to your resources, and it's not as strict, which I really like. And you can kind of change moves on the fly for different scenarios. Maybe you want to master one move and then just switch to a different move at some point that you've already mastered. I think that I think there's a lot of good things that are introduced with this battle with this set of battle mechanics, and I do
Yeah.
agree that I don't necessarily think it might. I'd want it as a standard in the traditional games, and I'm honestly really torn on how I would prefer combat to work in the traditional games. I think I'm kind of biased because I've played so much Pokemon in my life that I'm kind of used to the fighting the combat in traditional Pokemon, and as such, it doesn't bother me as much as other people who play a lot of different games. Um, but I think that it fits really well for this style of game, an open world action RPG. It's not a turn-based RPG, it's an action RPG. you know um and I think it works well. I could see this kind of going forward as a standard for Legends series games, but not necessarily main series games.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do
And
hope that they expand on this in the future as well. I do hope that they bring in some of those other elements that are cut, like abilities. But I think for a first opportunity, it's pretty good.
yeah.
Okay. Mic issues aside, are you good for one more topic?
Sure. I did want to say one more thing on the moves thing.
Go for it.
Uh, is that there are some battles in this game that, to the best of my recollection, are not a thing that's ever happened in a Pokemon game before. That, for me, makes utilizing the agile and strong moves crucial. And that is, there are times where you get stuck in a 2-on-1 fight,
Mm-hmm.
or worse.
Or four
And
on one.
yeah, and you really do have to come to those, um, like, you have to make those decisions. Like, do I go with the regular moves, or do I go with agile so I can try to get a few more turns against the other team that has 4 times as many turns as me? Or do I go for the strong move to get one out quickly, but that risks the chance that the other ones are going to hit me more? Um, and it provides just the tiniest bit of anxiety
Mm-hmm.
that a Pokemon game hasn't provided before.
Yeah, definitely agree on that one. And I think it's also interesting. I feel like more than ever in this Pokemon game, having a level advantage doesn't necessarily matter. I
Oh
found,
yeah,
where I've been 10 levels over some of the wild Pokemon and I'm not one-shotting them, which is great because then I can catch them. But, and they hit harder too. I don't know the code or the math behind it all, but it certainly seems like a lot of the wild encounters are overall difficult. And I wonder if that's partially because of the lack of, well, not lack of, but relatively few trainer fights, right?
yeah,
Because in the original games, trainer fights are meant to challenge and level up your Pokemon, and wild encounters are for you to catch new Pokemon. So I guess they kind of had to, work the former into the latter a little bit. But I do kind of want to move on for our last topic before I run out of footage to show. Um, and that is kind of a sour note, I will say. And I kind of wish we had touched on it earlier, but it's all right. And that is this game's main critique, which is the visuals. It's not the prettiest game, though it does have its moments. Um, and do you feel like a lot of the criticisms surrounding the visuals are justified? Um, or do you think it's different given the kind of environment in which this game was brought up, for lack of a better term?
Um, so I will start with a caveat. Um, that being that my personal method is I always prefer to compare Pokemon to Pokemon.
Right.
Um, but I will say I do think it could have been done better. Let me start there. There are some moments of disappointment. Um, I actually have a screenshot saved on my Switch that I took probably about 3 minutes into the game, where I just kind of strafed back and forth for like a minute while watching this one rock because the rock would literally change shape depending on where I was looking at it.
Interesting.
And it wasn't even like 90-degree angles. I'm talking like 3 steps to the right and the rock changed shape.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the kind of thing it can be a little jarring. Um, because it is at the end of the day, it's a minor thing.
Right.
But it was just major enough that I noticed it, and then I had to play around with it. And it
Yeah.
can be a little weird when you're traveling and stuff just pops in out of nowhere. But this game is on a scale that Pokemon has not attempted before.
Yes.
And I think it does a pretty good job. I think it does, honestly.
I would agree with you.
Um,
I would agree with you. I think that.
like it,
Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, you can see the stuff popping in, and you can see how things off in the distance look sparse because the models haven't populated. But in the moment, like when you're in a patch of grass surrounded by trees, getting assaulted by Paris because they're terrifying. In the moment, it's not a thing I think about. And maybe that's just my focus being different from the people who are complaining about the visuals. But whatever it is I'm focusing on, it's there and it looks good to me. So while I will stipulate that I do think they could have done better. I'm sure that they could have. They could have put in more work. They could have put this off until November of this year.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, or what have you. Put it off to like the normal quote unquote normal Pokemon release time. And it could have been a more complete game. Uh, but I enjoy what we ended up with. Um, and while we're talking on the visuals, I love the visual style of this game.
I agree.
Um, it looks like a painting. I think it's really beautiful in a minimalistic way, and it makes it feel old while feeling new at the same time.
Right.
It's a new game and it's gorgeous and it pushes boundaries like Pokemon hasn't before, but it also feels old and it gives me a connection to that time period that it wouldn't have had if it was in the art style of Sword and Shield.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I generally agree with you. I think your main point there is, it is good for a Pokemon game because a Pokemon game has never tried to attempt what this game is trying to do, right? Um, and I totally agree with that statement. And I think something that a lot of people fail to recognize, especially if you don't necessarily know kind of how Pokemon is made, um, people often say, oh, well, it's a AAA game, it's got to have it should be given a AAA budget, or it's the biggest franchise in sales, whatever, biggest profiting franchise in the world, right? They should put more effort into the games. And
yeah.
although I do agree to an extent, I think the problem is not necessarily with the budget, it is with the business model. It is the fact that Pokemon releases on a set schedule, and because the franchise is so huge. It has so many other different components to it besides just the games. They have an entire anime arc that they have to plan, release, and on a weekly basis. They have entire merch lines that they need to distribute by a certain time, in their projections so it can show up on their profit margins. And the games, they also have to slot those in relatively frequently. I mean, it's become commonplace for Pokemon games, at least one, to release every single year. And even though I personally don't think that I personally wouldn't have minded if they had kept this game in the oven, delayed it a couple months, because I know it would look better and it would run better. Um, that's just not the way that the Pokemon Company does things. And as long
Yeah.
as their business model stays that way, that the games will not be a Breath of the Wild. And that's something that Pokemon fans and gaming fans have to come to terms with. Um, Especially as they are reaching for new kind of avenues in which to, show off their game design skills. I don't know. So of course the game's not going to look good. Of course the game's going to have issues. Of course the game's going to have, bugs. And we've seen some patches that fixed some of the more important bugs in the game.
Right.
But as a whole, they don't look bad. I would say that I like the art style. It is very muted. A lot of the textures are very inconsistent. And my example for this is the Galaxy Team symbols on different characters. On some characters, they look polished, and in other characters, they look completely unrecognizable. And the other gripe I have, and before going into the couple of good things I have to say about the art style, is the lighting. The lighting shader that they use is a really just weirdly ugly purple in really dark spots, and it's really noticeable, especially in darker areas like caves. And it's frustrating to see that. I get what they're trying to do, but it just does not work with the rest of the art style. On the flip
Yeah.
side, I think the Pokemon themselves, which are the main points of the game, look very nice. I think they act very similarly to how they would in real life, and I think their animations play into that. And of course, the faces of the characters also look very good. There's a lot more expressiveness, especially on your face, which I really appreciated seeing. And
It's what Sun and Moon should have done.
exactly, it's what Sun and Moon should have done, and which Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl did well as well. Um, but I think that it definitely could have used more time in the oven. But we have to admit and we have to accept the fact that that simply was not going to happen. This game was going to come out on January 28th, no matter what. Right? So, I mean, given what we've got, it's not perfect. It's definitely the worst part of the game, in my opinion. But given all that context, it's something we just have to deal with. And that's why I think the fact that the gameplay in this game is so good, it can really take away from, how crappy the visuals look at times, which is another point that you touched on. When you're out in the wild and you're murdering Paris on a genocidal level, you don't care.
More like getting murdered.
Or getting murdered, rather. Yeah.
I don't have time to worry about whether or not a tree looks flat when I'm getting poison jabbed by 9 Paris at the same time.
Exactly.
I got to run for my life.
Okay. So with that, I think we can probably outro out. Fitzy, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon to gush about Pokemon for an hour and a half. Thanks again to Evkol for joining earlier. And be sure to follow us on Twitch at Bulbagarden, the Twitch stream you're watching right now if you're watching on Twitch. Or on YouTube at Bulbagarden. If you are watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button. And also on Twitter, at Bulbagarden on Twitter. Feel free to also, if you like the discussion today and want to participate, leave a comment down below or join our forums in our Discord where you can talk about this with other members of the Pokemon community. My name is the Caps Fan. Thank you guys very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next Bulbacast.
See you guys.